Well, here I am on the PHLY Sixers post-game show, brought to you
Fly,
by...
Eagles, fly.
I'm trying to talk about our sponsors, Kyle. Can you let me finish talking about our sponsors? Presented by Bet365. Download the Bet365 app and use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. That was,
I thought touchdown, 1, 2, 3.
I thought this team couldn't disappoint me and frustrate me. I was wrong,
man.
I was wrong. The Sixers fall. I believe it's 102-99. The score has been updated a couple times since the game ended. Doesn't matter. They lost to the Magic, their fifth loss in the last 7 games. They ended their quote unquote easy portion of the January schedule, going out on a low note. I don't know about a low note because that Pelican loss was pretty disappointing as well. Going out on a bad note as they gear up for a tough month to come. Boy. I think there is a lot to talk about, from Tyrese Maxey and his second half struggles, Paul George and his inability to play a couple minutes without fouling, Nick Nurse and his decisions, to everyone outside of the top 4 on his team who can't do anything positive on a basketball court. Kyle, where would you like to begin?
Well, as you were on your preamble there, Derek, I would like to point out to the audience, look, good news. They do get to play the Oklahoma City Thunder on Tuesday and then play a back-to-back against the Knicks, who, when they played them earlier this year, made them look like a G League team for stretches of that game. So just, we got to get that out of the way. The excitement's coming, baby. The good times are going to be rolling.
I mean, look at this. Thunder, Knicks, Pacers, Bucks, Nuggets, Cavs. Oh my gosh. If you can't beat the Pelicans and you can barely beat the Wizards and you can't beat the Magic without half of their roster, oh boy. Good luck.
Dude, the Pacers beat the Cavs today by like 15, by the way. And this team can't beat the Pelicans. Anyway, my big takeaway from this game, and this is not isolated to this game, right? They simply don't have enough guys. They do not have the players.
You shocked me because I thought you were going to start somewhere else, and that was going to be my big takeaway. So now I have to pivot a little bit, but I 100% agree with you.
No, I mean, we'll get to our other complaints later on down the road. This team does not have enough guys. And you can see that even with the guys who have been good this year, right? So to me, the great example that stood out in this game is Gershon. And he stood out in a bad way the previous game against New Orleans as well. He is a guy that has well overperformed expectations on a minimum contract this year, right? Like, comes in, immediate rotation player, shoots the ball well, plays 2 positions, has succeeded without their best players, has succeeded with their best players. And in spite of all that, he is still a role player, right? Like, he is a guy that on a good team, on the team that they theoretically should be someone that when he has a game like tonight where he has 3 rebounds in 39 minutes and they are just getting dumpstered by Jonathan Isaac and Paolo and other guys on offensive rebounding opportunities, that you would pull him. He would play maybe 20 minutes. He played, like a normal role, but a smaller role. And you would go to somebody else who is up to the task, who can do the job, who can help good offense, good defense, good two-way play on both ends of the floor. And they just can't do that because Yabu was one of like 3 guys who played tonight who has any idea or ability to play basketball, right? And so you just basically have to just throw him out there and say, well, he's not playing well and it's been actively detrimental to have him on the floor. But the alternative is you play Adem Bona, who is, going to foul every other possession on most nights, and is going to chase every shot blocking attempt, and is probably not going to help you a whole lot as a rebounder anyway, right? Like, that's not his strength. In 15 minutes, Adem Bona had 0 rebounds tonight as a big athletic guy, right? So that is a symptom of what is the bigger problem, which is there are not good enough basketball players, and there are not enough good enough basketball players on this roster. Take it a step further. So that's on the good end, right? Like, Yabu is a success story regardless. Tonight is just a night where he shouldn't play as much, and they don't have the option. Then you go to crunch time, right? After Paul George fouls out of the game, there's 2 minutes and I think it was 49 seconds left when Paul gets his 6th foul. Stupid foul to take, by the way, but we'll get to that later. He fouls out of the game, and Justin Edwards has to play in crunch time. Justin Edwards, who by virtue of a disappointing season as one of the top recruits at Kentucky, basically just fell into their lap as a two-way guy. Just, oh, he's a big project. We'll take a look at him. We don't need to play him basically at all this year. He is now playing crunch time minutes in a must-have type of game, right? Against another banged-up team who's down a lot of their best players. And the worst part is not that he played, but that it made perfect sense for him to play in that spot. Like, well, what else are you going to put in?
PG falls out, and you go, well, they have to turn to Justin Edwards here.
It's unbelievable. Like the fact that so you first say, I can't believe Justin Edwards is coming to this game. And I'm not trying to throw any shade at Justin Edwards, right? This is a symptom of the team's problems. First thought is, why is he coming into this game? Second thought is, well, I don't know who else I would want to come into this game right now. That's a really bad place to be, man. We'll get into Tyrese, we'll get into Paul and Nick and all these other things. But end of the day, man, there's just not enough guys that can help win basketball games.
Yeah. Justin Edwards was far and away, not even close, your 6th best player on the floor today. Justin, and you could argue Eric Gordon. Like you could argue he should be the 5th best player on the floor. Justin Edwards cannot be your 5th best player if you want to be playing meaningful basketball. It's just, and has no shade to Justin at all for an undrafted free agent. He has played better than I would have expected. I think he has a chance to take a disappointing season and maybe build an NBA career out of it. I'm not saying like a high level player, but like he could stick around he could get an NBA
role
contract.
player.
Let's put it that
sure.
way. Yeah. He should not, as a rookie, be your 6th best player. And look, I know they have injuries. Certainly Joel being tops among them. You know, obviously KJ is a role player. Caleb is a role player. Kyle Lowry gets minutes. He shouldn't, but Kyle Lowry gets minutes. There are too few players, real players. When you have half of your roster unplayable, every injury is going to become insurmountable. And when you get hit with 3 or 4 of them at the same time, the sky really falls. And look, I know that Joel Embiid's like a massive part of this, but they should be able to win games without him. And look, Tyrese and Paul weren't perfect, especially Tyrese in the second half. We'll get to that. But they played, especially Paul in the second half, minus the fouls, which again we'll get to, well enough that you should be able to beat an Orlando team missing the players that they were missing. But you can't because you have no margin for error, because the moment you bring anyone off of your bench, you are an absolute train wreck. I mean, outside of Edwards, the only points were Reggie Jackson with 4 points. Everyone else went scoreless. You look up and you start jotting down some of these rotations. And, you're sitting there and you're like, oh man, this is another Reggie Doughton lineup. Or what was the one that they had there to end the first quarter? It was, I have it somewhere in my notes. My notes are a mess. Maxey, Oubre, Ricky, Yabu, and Bona. Oh my God. And look, I want to blame Nick. Trust me, I want to blame Nick. There are not enough NBA players that he has available to avoid some of these lineups. And that lineup was still particularly bad, but there's just too many unplayable players, especially when you're sitting here with a 15th roster spot that's unused, a 2-way roster spot that is unused. And again, they are not going to get up to the second apron. I've heard there are maybe, and this wasn't brought up by a team, this was brought up by a fan. The most charitable explanation I've heard on not using that roster spot is maybe they want to keep open the option of maybe salary dumping someone like KJ to get under the first apron by enough that they can then use or sign someone that was making above the mid-level on the buyout market. No, that is not an excuse to play with this shorthanded of a roster. I can understand that from a tactical perspective if you had a strong, 7 through 14 on your roster. You don't. You have a train wreck 7 through 14. You have, and by the way, salary dumping someone like KJ, you're salary dumping a contributor. You have to get a real good buyout player. That's not going to be worth the odds of that being worth it are just so low. You cannot sit here and just try to save luxury tax dollars because you don't want to use that 15th roster spot. You just don't have enough players to sit here and do that. It's infuriating. It's aggravating. It's killing this team. They should have a few more wins. And when you look at this roster, there are so many missed opportunities over the last few games that even just one more competent player, one more competent ball handler, one player you could turn to maybe have Tyrese play, I don't know, 35 minutes instead of 39 minutes every night. Maybe he's not as worn out and he makes a few more shots down the stretch. I don't want to let Tyrese Maxey off the hook, but his minutes that he's playing right now are just absolutely absurd. This is like peak Tibbs level stuff. And you do not want to do peak Tibbs level on a guy who is the only offensive option. Like, it is hard to carry the entire offense for 39 minutes when nobody else on the team can even dribble. And it's just, I don't understand. You've talked about, like, you don't buy into the plan with regards to Joel. I don't buy into the plan with keeping this roster. It's one thing to come in here and be like, all right, I'm going to try Eric Gordon. He was decent for the Suns last year. I'm going to try Kyle Lowry. Nick likes him. He was at least an NBA player last year. Let's try. But when you have this much information that they are just not NBA players at this point, and you keep running them out there, why are we sitting on our hands waiting for a date where you might be out of the playoff hunt by the time we get there?
Yeah. And look, you nailed it, Derek. I think they are operating, when I say they, I mean organizationally and in the front office, as if the season is going the way that they expected. They are not reacting to the actual reality of what has taken place this year, right? I understand wanting to let things develop, wanting to see the full strength roster, not wanting to, spend more capital than they want to right now in a panic move to, like, make a trade just to make a trade, right? Like avoiding a sunk cost type of deal. I understand that stuff. You lose me when you're holding an open roster spot, when you're holding an open two-way spot right now, which I still haven't gotten any explanation for that.
There's no reason to cut Pete Nate if you're not going to immediately use that spot. I'm sorry. Did I yell, or was that a frustration grab at your head or a headache grab at your head?
No, you're good. I was just me, motioning.
I just want to make sure.
Look, the Wizards came here last Wednesday to Philadelphia. Jared Butler lit their asses up. Right? That's a guy on a two-way contract on the worst team in the league, right? If you had him on a two-way and brought him in right now, he is offering more than nothing, certainly, and he's probably offering more than guys who are rostered players right now. There just has to be someone out there that you could convince to come here, even if you're going to cut them in pretty short order, right? Like, bring them in and they can play 5 games. You go to them and say, hey, look, two-way guy playing overseas, whoever it is, G League player, we have a minutes opportunity. You have the ability to come in here, play for us, put your name a little bit more back on the map, and then we don't know if we'll be able to keep you beyond that. We don't know if there'll be minutes beyond that. But this is an audition, right? A dress rehearsal for more opportunities in the future. That is a great pitch to a lot of guys, not just around near the league, but around the world. Like, hey, dude, you might be able to help turn this season around. That gives you good PR. It's good for your agent. It's good for you, whatever. And they're just doing nothing. Like, you can't sit here and tell me the best option is to do nothing because you don't trust, or I shouldn't say you, because I don't know if it's the front office and the head coach aligned on this. You can't sit here and tell me that there's no value in bringing someone in when Ricky Council is playing less than 6 minutes and Jeff Doughton is playing just over 5 minutes. That's the head coach telling you with his actions, I do not believe in these guys, right?
Yes.
So if you're overseeing the team and you see that, I don't care if you have a higher estimation of Jeff Doughton and Ricky Council's abilities. If you're going to keep the head coach in place and he's not going to use these players, you need to put someone else there that maybe he'll use. And if he doesn't use it, then great, that's his fault. And we can have that conversation. But if he's not playing these guys, he is sending the clearest message to you that he could. Hey, somebody else has got to be here to give them a shot because these guys have not worked and aren't good enough.
I want to give a shout out to Aaron Sniper. I mentioned this in our Discord the other day. And by the way, if you want to join our Discord where Kyle and I rant even more than we are now, you can go to allphly.com. We'd love to have you. We talk a lot of hoops in there. If you just signed, because I think some people look at it like, well, these are minimum contracts. You can't expect much. For the most part, that's true, which is why you have to be quick and willing to pivot off of them when they prove to you that they're not working. But if they just made one different decision, let's say campaign instead of Kyle Lowry, how many more wins do they have this season? Just one guy on a minimum contract who actually has a pulse at a position that they need. 2 more wins, 3 more wins. Maybe they're right there at the right there and avoiding a play-in spot just based off of a small move on the margin. He's got almost outside of McCain and Yabusele, every other move on the margins, and some of them weren't even on the margin, right? Like Andre Drummond was a real NBA contract, not a huge one, but real cap space.
Yeah.
You could have gotten Chris Dunn with that money or something like that. All of these moves on the margin, that outside of Yabusele and McCain, who he didn't expect to contribute this year anyway, have been bad. And he has done absolutely nothing to rectify.
It's just like, here's the thing, right? Every post-game show that when they lose, it's always a referendum on somebody, right? Like people, I get it. People are angry. They deserve to be based on what they expected, what they were promised, and what they've gotten. And depending on the game, it's like Maxey's not good enough, or Paul George is a waste, or Nick Nurse stinks, or Daryl's sitting on his hands. Here's the thing. All these things are true, right? And so I think the most disappointing, the most angering thing is to sit on your hands as all this is happening, right? Because if you do something and it doesn't work, at least you're trying something, right? I don't think inaction is acceptable, right? Like you got to mid-December and you're way behind the teams that you thought you were either equal or maybe even better than, right? Like so that one should have been wake up call number one, but now you're in mid-January. You have not been able to articulate what is going on with Joel the whole year, right? These day-to-day things are turning into weeks at a time that he's missing with just like, well, we hope he'll play, but who knows? You have an open roster spot and an open two-way. There's no explanation for that. There's just like 100 different things that are organizational failures that somebody has to step up. Somebody has to act. Somebody has to do something. Unless, look, if you're going to throw away the season and say, we're fine with this, we'll just take our lottery odds, we'll shut people down, then great. But if you're going to do that, then do it and knock it off with the like, well, we're just going to wait and see, and we're going to hope, and we're going to do this. And, just wait until Joel's back and, sell more tickets while stringing everybody along. It's just such a nonsense way to deal with the public and to treat your fan base. And I am angry for them. I would say that.
Yeah. And look, I think some people are going to look and probably make the argument, well, and perhaps some people in the front office are doing this too. Well, they're only 5 games back of the 6th seed. Decent record when Joel plays of late, yada, yada, yada. Look at their schedule over the next month. If Joel isn't playing like 4 out of 5 games and playing at least the level he was playing at before he got this latest foot injury, because he was actually playing pretty good basketball at that point. If he's not playing 80% of the time, they could be 10 games out. That might be overstating. They could be 7 or 8 games out. Like this is a real tough stretch where if you're not playing at close to your actual like level and your abilities, you could get smoked in some of these games. So I do think even though, yes, they are still within striking distance, it can go dark real quick.
Yeah, let's revisit that idea in a moment after we have a quick moment to talk about some of our friends and partners. One of our wonderful partners, guys, are the good people at Ace Hardware Home Services. The power of the Ace brand is that they strive to be the best, most trusted provider of home preservation services, and they offer a wide range of things that they can help you with around your home. As I can say with firsthand experience, whether you're a first-time homeowner or you're on house number 2, 3, you're a big baller, you're a Richie Rich over there, something can and will go wrong. And while it's always a nice idea, like, hey, I can do it, I can fix it and learn how to do those things, Ace Hardware Home Services, you know that they have the skills and the tools, the know-how to get the job done. They are always ready for the next job. They bring experience. They have local plumbers and techs that handle everything from repairs and seasonal maintenance to installations and upgrades. They bring understanding to the table. They listen to your goals, and the job's not complete until you are satisfied with it. And they bring helpful to your home so you can spend more time on the projects that really matter to you. So visit Ace Hardware Home Services online at www.acehardwarehomeservices.com to get you started on your next project.
Well, look, if you're like me, you've been fighting the battle with your hair for a couple of years now, and this team is going to make me lose the very last one of them. If you're like that, Glatt Hair is where you'll want to turn to. Anyone can buy equipment and say they do hair restoration. Only Glatt Hair Restoration by Morgenstern Medical offers decades of proven results using an innovative approach and delivered by leaders in the industry. Glatt Hair can help during all stages of hair loss with leading-edge treatments for prevention, restoration, including laser light therapy, non-invasive TED treatments, vitamin supplementation, topical and oral medications, PRP and stem cell restoration, and hair restoration surgery. Each patient receives a complimentary one-on-one consultation to pinpoint the best course of treatment. Caring patient advocates work with you from the first phone call to the last follow-up visit. They understand that this decision can be emotional and challenging, and that they're here to help make your experience simple and stress-free. Glatt Hair isn't just about restoration, it's about innovation. Their breakthrough treatments really do dramatically change lives. Change your hair, change your life. Bald is now optional. If you want to improve how you look and how you feel about yourself, Glatt Hair has the right treatment for you. Regain your confidence. Visit GlattHairMCTR.com or call 610-980-4000 to get started. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Sixers postgame show brought to you by Bet365. Are we done ranting about the roster, or do you still got a little bit left in you?
Well, so I just wanted to quickly talk about the schedule stuff that you were mentioning there. And as it relates to Joel, part of the problem is like now, if you had brought Joel back, or if Joel had been able to play over this last week, right? He probably doesn't play well, given that he's dealing with a foot issue and still working through the, wearing a mask with the sinus fracture, whatnot. But you're getting him, in some respect, tune-up games, right? He plays against Phoenix. He plays against Washington, plays against the Pelicans, plays today against Orlando, banged up Orlando. That's given him a bit of I hate to use the word, but a nice, easy ramp into this part of the schedule, right? Where you get to get these reps, you play with Paul, you play with Tyrese, you play with the rest of these guys. And then as the schedule heats up and you're playing teams like the Thunder, like the Knicks, like the Nuggets, the Bucks, the Cavs, you've at least been able to get in game shape or stay in game shape to some degree and keep your game sharpness. Now, what you're asking Joel to do, and it legitimately does not matter when he comes back between now and the trade deadline. Any game that he plays, except for maybe the Chicago game, which is 2 weeks from now, right, is not a game that's like, oh, just throw Joel in there and he'll be fine. It's OKC, New York, Indiana, who's not that good, but at least they're more competent than the Sixers, the Bucks, the Nuggets, the Cavs. Then there's the Bulls game, and then it's Lakers, Sacramento, Denver, Boston, Dallas, Miami. That's the trade deadline. That's your upcoming stretch of the schedule, right? There are no gimmies. Even Chicago, Joel played well in a game against Chicago earlier this year. They're another competent, right on the edge of the play-in type of team, and we'll see where they're at in a couple of weeks. But there is no game where it's like, yeah, we could give Joel a soft landing and just win easily, right? We saw that when he played against Indiana and left the game with they weren't playing well before he left that game due to injury, right? So they have made this bed, and I don't know how anybody could have any confidence that they're turning the season around based on his health and availability, based on who's on the roster, based on what they would have to do to make meaningful upgrades to the roster, and based on the complete inaction up to this point. anybody trying to spin you hope and a dream right now, God love you, but it ain't going to be me, and it's probably not going to be anybody else on this podcast.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, the biggest hope I can give you is that if sports were predictable, there'd be a lot fewer people talking about it, and the athletes would make a lot less money. So basically, you're saying weird stuff has to happen. That's the best hope I can give you. Something completely unexpected has to turn around, and it happens. Doesn't mean it's a high probability of happening. All right. What to you was the defining moment of this game? Was it not getting the ball in bounds? Was it where
yes.
that was too late for it?
No, in many ways, I think that moment defines their entire season, right? Where I think for all the complaints that are being made on this show and have been made in recent weeks, I do think at least the want to was there, right? We had concerns after the Pelicans game where the second half of that game, the defense just gives out. They clearly had kind of quit.
The Warriors game, the effort wasn't there.
Yeah. There was some
back and all that stuff. Yep.
Yeah. So we've had some complaints and issues with stuff like that, but I didn't see that tonight. And so that's good, right? But then you get to the guts of the game. Orlando gets a huge offensive rebound. Paolo then scores. You can't score at the other end. And even though the game's not really winnable at this point, you have a chance to call timeout. You put all the minds together in the huddle to draw up your best thing, and you cannot even get the ball in play before a 5-second violation happens, right? And I would love to say that's all on Nick Nurse, right? I don't believe that Nick Nurse is completely incapable of drawing an inbounds pass to the point that they can't get the ball in play, right? Like, I don't think my complaints about Nick Nurse do not go that deep, right? I don't think he's that basketball challenged, right?
He would not have survived this long in the league.
No.
If that were,
He would not have developed any type of reputation. I think it is certainly a failure, at least in part on him, but it's also just these guys aren't that good. They don't have enough smart basketball players. I keep harping on this over and over again when a lot of people were rightfully concerned about the rebounding in the offseason. Derek and Devon and I sat here and said, they don't have enough passers. They don't have enough.
The biggest need is a two guard and a ball handler and a decision maker. Yep.
They just don't have enough players who, once you take them out of like the first read, I don't think most of these guys have any idea how to react. There is no ability to freelance, right? And I think having somebody last year like a Nick Batum, or to a lesser extent because he was hurt most of the year, someone like DeAnthony Melton, right? Who guys that are really good at, I see what's unfolding on this play. I'm going to cut into space, get to a spot, and then I can make connective passes, or I can make a quick layup, or I can make a corner three, whatever it is. And just smart relocation, movement. And there just aren't that many guys who are capable of that on this team, who don't see or read the game quickly enough that when the initial read or the initial play goes tits up, which it happens quite frequently with this team, they can't respond. They are not a team that deals well with adversity. And I think it's because they just can't. Like, these are not guys that, as a collective, are good at dealing with those challenges. And so when you don't have Joel, who he's got his issues with some of this stuff as well, but when you don't have him to just like paper over it with talent and shot making and just say the 3 stars can figure this stuff out, it becomes a lot more apparent watching this team night to night.
Yeah. Look, there's just too many, there's too many either poor decision makers or slow decision makers, or players who just have tunnel vision and no creativity, and usually it's a combination of all three on this roster. And maybe if your big three were on the floor for 90% of the games, you could make do with that because they simplify the role players' decision-making so much. Unfortunately, we have the exact opposite. In terms of how this season has played out, it is the exact opposite. And all of a sudden you're looking up, and I tweeted this out, I'm relying on a Ricky Council driving kick to Justin Edwards for a big three. And it's like, what in the world is going on here? How did we get to this spot? And yeah, it's one thing to take like a swing on a player turning his athleticism or his hustle into production. And the Sixers have had a couple of that. Like Kelly, for the most part, outside of the fact that he's shooting like 28% from 3-point range, Kelly, for the most part, has been a positive, especially when he's been playing alongside Joel Embiid, which sort of makes the point I was making a second ago. Yet Yabusele, who certainly he's a good decision maker, but you didn't know what to expect from him. That's been a positive. But for the most part, you have too many players of similar archetypes, whether that is the Kelly, Ricky, Caleb, KJ archetype, whether that is the Lowry, Reggie, Gordon archetype of just hashtag too small. There are too many people with similar deficiencies to where when you need something different, you don't have that kind of diversity. You don't have that kind of trust in most of these players coming off of the bench. So you look there, and like tonight, Yabusele, one of your more dependent players, but they're really having struggles on the glass. Your only option to turn to is a rookie who was drafted in the 40s or whatever, and who isn't really a rebounder anyway because he chases every shot that goes up, every shot. And he ended up with 0 rebounds in 15 minutes. And it's like, is this the guy who you want to bring in to fix your rebounding problems? No, you don't really have a solution. And I get part of that is that Drummond wasn't available. Drummond has been bad for most of the season, so it's not necessarily a great excuse. But it's just one example of how there's too much overlap and deficiencies on this roster and no real way to rectify a problem that's going on mid-game. Like, it's hard to make adjustments when everyone has similar flaws.
Yeah, and we talked pregame, Derek, about my concern beyond, pointing at everything that's happened this season. But my concern for this game was, despite the fact that they were really banged up as well, Orlando was still able to come into that game with some semblance of a cohesive identity, right? Like, they were going to play good defense, play tough, play physical. They're going to hit the glass. They still have a lot of athletes available to play. And that bears out, right? Like, the Sixers got 3 offensive rebounds to 12 for Orlando. And it felt like a heck of a lot more for Orlando, quite frankly. And they were able to impose their will in a way that was predictable and foreseeable. And in part, that's a, coaching and structure thing, but it's also a roster thing, right? Like, they just have a lot of these guys who are big and athletic at their positions. And so few guys go down, and right now it's more than a few guys. They're still able to play the way that they want to play and try to squeak out these games and grind it out and just, get into people. What would you even say the Sixers' attempt is this year with style or structure, or like, has there been a game where we could sit there, point to it and say, this is what Nick Nurse basketball is for the Sixers? Yeah, this is what Sixers basketball is? No, and I'm not saying that's all his fault, right? I don't know how you say this is Sixers basketball when Joel Embiid plays like 12 games out of 37 or 38 or whatever it is at this point. That's just not possible. But there is no identity. If they have any kind of identity, it's we force a lot of steals and we can be athletic on the wings, right? And that's about it. But even then, as I said earlier, that results in, your 12th in defense compared to Orlando. That's second in defense. It's the difference between this is a real identity. We can, at least kind of build on this to, sometimes, and it can be better when Joel's there, but it's just every single night. You're just looking the gift box and see, what is it tonight? I have no idea.
Yeah. No, the only identity they have is that forcing turnovers, which they don't even really turn into transition points all that much, but they do force a decent chunk of turnovers. And they actually do it without giving up as many open corner threes as Nick Nurse teams have done in the past. That could be an identity if Joel Embiid was in there to sort of, protect the rim and turn that top 12 defense into like a top 5 defense. That's the one area where I would give them a little bit of a pass. Because I do think they would be a pretty good defensive team if he was on the court regularly, but they're not. And to the point that we started the show off with, they have made very little attempts to adjust it. And the offense has been a disaster the entire season. It doesn't matter with Joel, without Joel, with all three. It has not been good. There's been no identity, no flow. One pass, like you said, one action, That doesn't work. All of a sudden you're ISOing. It has been bad. Bad.
Not great, Bob, as they
It's
say.
not been great. It really was like that game because, Paul George made a bunch of tough shots there in the second half. I think he had 8 points at halftime. So he had 27 points after the break. But once and we'll get to him a little bit later. Once he left, they had nothing offensively. There was no quality shots being generated.
I mean, even with him I guess he wasn't in to start the fourth, is my recollection, right? It was a Maxey led lineup, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think you're right. Yeah.
But I mean, they didn't have their first field goal of the fourth quarter until I have it somewhere in my notes. Oh no, they went through a period from about the 9.5 minute mark to the 5 minute mark where they didn't have a single field goal. And I think
and even before then, that was Justin Edwards made like a bank that was pretty lucky. And then they got a transition bucket from Gershon. Their half court offense was still pretty bad even in that stretch.
Yeah. And I keep coming back to this idea that I just don't see any structure, and I would say if we want to do Paul George, do we want to do that now, or should we do a quick palate cleanse and then come back to talk about it?
I think we should probably do that after the break because that's going to be a longer conversation.
Yeah. All right. Let's do that then. We'll be right back.
All right. Did all of that holiday shopping leave you with a credit card balance that's weighing you down? Now think about this. What if you could pay it off faster and with zero interest until 2026? It's true because TrueMark Financial is offering zero interest on balance transfers for 12 months, so all your payments can go toward reducing your balance, not just covering interest. Here's the play. Transfer your existing balance from another institution to a TrueMark Financial Visa credit card and take advantage of this amazing offer. But hurry, because you have to apply by February 28th, 2025. Whether you're interested in earning rewards, cash back, or simply prefer a low rate for everyday purchases, with TrueMark Financial, you can choose the credit card that best fits your financial needs. Visit TrueMark.com/compare for full details and to apply today. TrueMark Financial, federally insured by the NCUA, equal opportunity lender, terms and conditions apply. All loans are subject to approval. 3% balance transfer fee applies. Standard rates apply after the promotional rate.
Also want to give a shout out to our wonderful friends at Golden Nugget Jewelers. While the Eagles, yes, the Eagles, not the Sixers, are trying to hunt down a ring, you can too. Go to Golden Nugget Jewelers. They are at Chestnut and 8th, downtown Philadelphia. They have been family owned and operated since 1987, longer than I have been alive. If you're getting engaged, they have a wide assortment of rings and wedding bands to fit anyone's style. You can receive a final cleaning and written appraisal with every engagement ring. Not just wedding jewelry, though. You can find watches, diamond necklaces, diamond bracelets, earrings, and more. You guys can see I got my gold ring. I got a gold chain on under here. So I love me a family-owned and operated local Philadelphia jeweler. You deserve an expert and the best price. Golden Nugget Jewelers is where Philly goes to get engaged. Head over to goldennuggetjewelers.com to learn more.
All right, welcome back to the PHLY Sixers postgame show presented by Bet365. So I guess we can go right into Paul George, who was our player of the game. There wasn't all that much to choose from, but because of his second half, like I said, 18 points in the second half, finished with 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists. He was, I think, pretty clearly the player of the game, especially, Maxey with the first half. He had certainly a say in that. I think Maxey had 19 in the first half, something like that. Maybe even a little more, 22, something like that. He had 10 free throws.
I think he had 22, and then he didn't score again until midway through the fourth on some free throws.
But he went through a very long stretch in the second half without scoring. Huge droughts from the Sixers offensively, ended up with 6 turnovers. So I think this one was a pretty easy call.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there is one stat line of Paul's that I didn't mention, which is the 6 fouls. Kyle, go.
So here's what I would say about Paul George. Obviously a good game, and certainly a very good game compared to the standard he's set this year. I think one of the reasons beyond the team sucking that it's been hard for the fans to build any kind of sentiment behind him or this is going to turn around is that every Paul George game kind of just looks the same regardless of how well or how poorly he plays, because it's just making shots. There really is not a whole lot of mystery, or like the Jimmy Butler experience, for example. Obviously, he coasted through a good part of that season that he played here in the regular season. But you could always tell that it was like, oh, when Jimmy Butler ratcheted it up, you could see it, right? When Joel Embiid ratchets it up on defense, for example, or is really going after rebounds, it's like, man, he is like just bulldozing through people. And that is not Paul George. And that's not to say that he's not valuable. And it's not to say he can't be very helpful. But it is just skill and finesse. And now the rebounding has been good, right? And that was good tonight. It's been good to see him making an effort there. But the scoring stuff, you don't ever really see like, oh, man, Paul is really just like putting his shoulder into people and going through them and doing this. It's just a lot of skill shots, right? Post turnarounds, catch and shoot threes, shooting off movement. And it is great, and it looks pretty, and it was very, very helpful and impactful tonight. And I just still couldn't escape the feeling of like, I don't know, this kind of looks similar to the rest of the games he plays, and he's just missed a lot of shots. So on the one hand, it's weirdly comforting in that it's like, oh, these good games, he's not far away from having them, right? He's getting a lot of similar looks. He's taking a lot of similar shots. His career averages say he should hit way more of the corner threes and the above the break threes or wherever it is on the floor. Everything suggests he should be better. But it's going to be so hard to actually determine going into any given night, oh, yeah, this looks like it's going to be a good Paul game. There's no real sign that's like, oh, I'm ready for a big Paul game. It all has kind of blended into each other. And I'm sorry to Paul for on a good night for him being like, all looks the same to me. But it's a feeling I just can't shake having watched him. Look, I've watched him plenty over the years when he's been on other teams, right? But it's a different thing when it's night after night after night after night after night on a team that you're covering. And I just can't escape that feeling in the back of my mind.
It's also a different feeling because he's 34 and you're always trying to weigh what's natural regression and what might be physical regression, and what might be like lingering effects of the bone bruises. I will say overall, of late, his shooting has been much better. Like those tough shots are going in. In the month of January after tonight, he is averaging 21.5 points, 7.3 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and 1.2 steals while shooting 45.1% from three on 8.5 attempts per game. That is real good. That is, I think, a lot more of the Paul that we expected. It does look a lot like the same Paul George when he was struggling. That is a little bit the nature of a high volume, difficult jump shooter. There's going to be ups and downs. It was a lot more extended this year than it normally is. It's also part that I think we are grading him on a slightly different curve now because for the most part, on most games, he is a number two option. And when you're that number two option, you have to be able to create not only for yourself, but for teammates, in part to create shots for them. And I think for the most part, outside of his crazy passes that he does at least once or twice a game, the passing has still been, I think, a little better than I expected. But you have to be able to create getting to the rim, getting to the line, putting pressure on the defense so that if that shot isn't falling, you're not entirely dependent on it. You're not completely ineffective. And the problem is when that shot's not falling, he has not been able to leave an imprint on the game. When you need him to be a second option or even at times a first option and you can't leave an imprint on the game, it gets very, very frustrating. So on the one hand, I don't know how to judge him because it's like, well, if he was playing in his optimal role off of Joel, they had time to form chemistry, which by the way, they right now have zero of, and he was mostly a third option, would I feel differently about his athletic limitations? And would I give him a little bit of slack because maybe that is still the bone bruise, which he admitted to recently he's still feeling it, even if he's not going to use it as an excuse. Yeah, maybe. And maybe this does come back to the fact that Joel's been out and Tyrese hasn't made that playmaking jump and you just need more out of him than you previously did. But you're still, the end result is still, I don't know what to rely on with this team. They're not good enough offensively on most nights and they're blowing completely winnable games. And look, he carried them in the second half today. Absolutely carries them. They have no chance if he doesn't go bonkers there in the second half. But then he bites for a pump fake with, what was it, 2.5 minutes left? How many minutes? It doesn't matter. He bites with a pump fake
Just
late in the game that if you're sitting there with 5 fouls, you absolutely can't bite on that pump fake.
yeah.
Let him have those 2 points. You were carrying the entire offense. You have no chance if you foul out. He just makes those decisions, and it drives him mad.
Yeah, look, I don't mind him committing fouls sometimes, right? Because that'll be the product of playing aggressive defense, and that's the product of, frankly, playing defense as well as he has, right? You're not going to play good defense without ever putting yourself at risk. That isn't how basketball works. So if he was committing 4, even 5 fouls, okay, right? But also, you're 34 years old. You've been in the league for however many years, 13 years, whatever it is. You know, once you get in foul trouble, there are certain plays that, I'm not saying you take them off. I'm not saying you don't play any defense, but you have to know the difference between this is a potential game-saving play and this is 2 points for the other team that I just have to concede and to keep my hands back and keep myself in the game so I can continue giving my teammates and myself a chance to win. And so I've been disappointed in, like, we hammered him the other night, right, for that third foul he committed in the first half against New Orleans, specifically because it was a dumb foul. It was him reacting to a non-call on the other end and saying, well, I'm going to commit a stupid foul before they even
one of the dumbest fouls I've ever seen.
Right?
It was legitimately like a pouting foul.
Yeah, you don't
when
have
you have
the
2
luxury,
fouls and there's 8 minutes left in the half.
You don't have the luxury of frustration fouls right now. You just don't. And the thing I've been saying with him and Tyrese, neither one of them is able to play a bad half. You cannot get away with, I was really good in this half and either average or worse in the other one. And it's not really fair, right? Like, Tyrese had an incredible first half tonight, right? 22 points. He shoots 10 free throws. He's, looks really good. And then is complete non-entity for most of that second half. And I get it. We led the show with, you don't have enough guys. The front office is not doing anything. End of the day, these two, if they're going to win without Joel, have to just be like way, way up there in terms of the level. And they're not getting there consistently enough. It's not all their fault that they're where they are in the standings or anything else, but heavy is the head that wears the $50 million crown and the 36 or whatever $1 million crown.
Yeah. And look, it's come up in the chat, the other day against Pelicans after the game, he said that he was getting bored. And the context of that was he found playing center defensively more boring than playing on the wings. Basically, he wanted to be more active defensively. And when you're playing center, you've got to sort of like watch and diagnose, and you can't really take the gambles. I think that's what he was getting at. I don't think he means he's bored here in Philly or he's bored on the court. He just doesn't like playing center defensively like he does on the wing. 2 things. First of all, just a dumb way to phrase that. You can't, you got to know, and you're a podcaster, Paul, you got to know people are going to talk about this.
You got to just say, like, I don't really know what to do
on the
in
wings
that
because I want to get out and defend people on the perimeter. There's a million ways to answer that. That's not going to bring you the scrutiny. But also, when you're defending Goga, you can't fall asleep 15 feet from the rim and let him get the easiest backdoor cut he has ever had. If you're going to say, I'm bored playing center on defense, you damn well better play good defense when you're at center then, because people are going to pick that apart. It was just frustrating.
Yeah. Again, it's a self-inflicted wound. You don't have to say that. And you're absolutely right. When your job is speaking, you should think about how you speak. Pretty easy ask, I think.
Yeah. And he has a lot of look, I say dumb stuff all the time, but when you do, you're going to get some grief for it. All right, Tyrese.
Just bad second half, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I believe he was 5 for 11 at halftime, 10 free throws, 22 points. He finishes the game 7 for 19. So he was 2 for 8 from the field. Didn't do a whole heck of a lot of playmaking. Again, the the defense was there, like the effort was there. He gets 3 steals. He's trying to make up for whatever he's not doing offensively, but 6 turnovers, and some of them were just ghastly. And I can't shake the idea that like the player that they need next to him to make up for what he doesn't have as a point guard is just such a narrow window that you have to fit that player into, that I just don't know that I believe in him to the degree you need to have him be a max contract pillar of the franchise type of player. I say it all the time. The ideal player next to him is James Harden, who plays defense and shoots catch and shoot threes, which is like good luck. Yeah. You don't find 6'6" lead
maybe
league in assists. Yeah, but again, right? Like
good luck.
Or like Drew Holiday would be Drew Holiday in his prime would be a guy who does the vast majority of the things you want. Now is Drew,
but even with Drew, I think you probably want Tyrese playing a little more off ball than Drew would allow him, but he'd be a good fit for sure.
Yeah, but you're getting into a class of player that is extremely difficult to acquire, whether that's in the draft, whether that's in free agency, whatever it is, whether it's you just a miracle falls out of the sky and this guy somehow ends up on your team. Like that's a very hard player to be the perfect fit with Tyrese. Now, do you need the perfect 2 through 4 guy with Tyrese if and when Joel is healthy? Probably not, right? Like Joel serving as that hub of the offense and the synergy that they have has clearly been enough to play at a high level, and both of those guys to play. Joel at, point per minute last year. Tyrese makes his first All-Star team. Everything's going well. Like, I get it. Like, it's a different sort of team concept based on how the roster is set up and structured. But we're seeing right now what his limitations are as a lead guard. That doesn't mean he's not valuable. Doesn't mean he can't be part of a team that wins. But every passing day, I just get more and more concerned about, all right, what doesn't he have and what would he need to do, or what could we reasonably expect him to do to rectify that and be part of, a major winner here in Philadelphia.
Yep. All right. You want to get to a couple of super chats here and then we can close.
We got plenty of them. The
this
people
one out.
Fired up.
We got to go to our haiku master, which have we seen Skunk in the Discord, buddy? With the number of I get you want to get your Discords read. It would be cheaper to become a diehard member, and we have an entire channel dedicated to this.
There is a Sixers haiku channel in the Discord.
I'm just trying to save you money at this point, if I'm being honest. The title of this haiku is "Whiplash of the Id." Birds win brings great joy. My gaze turns to the Sixers. Salt corrodes the heart.
Sounds about
Not
right.
wrong, but the first part, the Eagles win, is way more important. So I will take that if I have to. Unfortunately, I cover the other team. Do the Sixers, this one from Juan Sastre, do the Sixers sell off role players, can lose 8 of the next 10? Unfortunately, I don't think you really have role players that have value. That's part of the problem of where the Sixers are at.
It's really Yabu, right? Yabu's
the role player you would sell off. Maybe, but I don't think Kelly has positive value right now just because he has that player option for the second.
He's more neutral, I think.
KJ has more value as a matching. So even if you don't use that matching salary at the deadline now, you'd probably want to keep him for the summer in case you feel better about your chances and want to pursue someone there. So it really is Yabu. And we've covered this in the past where, basically because any team that acquires Yabu will not have bird rights on him. I don't think anyone's giving you a lot for him. So like you could sell him, but it would be for like second round picks. I don't think it would even be worth it.
That's Marcus, the problem, right? That it's a bunch of guys who you could trade them for something, but it's not anything that's materially helping the team.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see here. Bernard McCoy, Santi Aldama from the Grizz, and Keon Ellis from Sacramento. Is it doable? These two will solve a lot of our problems, guard and center. And then he asks whether or not the season is over. I don't think it's impossible. Like if the Grizz aren't willing and don't feel like they can give Santi that next contract, they might look to sell him. I don't know. A lot can happen between now and then. But clearly there was a disconnect on the contract over the summer. So if they are concerned. I think the rumors there haven't been any concrete rumors that they're shopping him or even really listening, right?
No, I think it's just been the league
Yeah.
openly speculating, like, hey, they didn't pay him and where they're at as a franchise.
And he's still young enough and versatile enough and will retain value. Well, the retained value we'll see on the next contract, but he's still young enough and versatile enough that if things go, as you phrased earlier, tits up, I think you can still trade him. And he's young enough that he can be part of a core. I think he'd be a good fit. The question is how much it will cost.
Yeah, and Keon Ellis, by the way, who we did talk about a little bit when we did the Kings show recently, is playing a lot more for them now. And that was a big sticking point with Mike Brown, right? Like that Keon Ellis kind of fell off the radar and wasn't in the mix now. But since they removed Mike Brown, his minutes are going up and up, right? Like he didn't play that much against Boston in a comfortable win. But before that, he played over 48 minutes in an overtime game against Miami. He plays 25 minutes against Golden State in a win, 33 against Memphis. He played almost 38 minutes against the Sixers. So that has coincided with they're now on a 6-game winning streak, I think. And Ellis has been part of that turnaround. I don't think he's a guy that they just give up for chump change, right? I don't think they give up anybody for chump change, but certainly not a young player who I think fits what they wanted to build. It was weird that Mike Brown wasn't playing him, but yeah, I think he's probably not extremely tough to get, but tough to get at a price that anybody would be happy with.
It's a little bit like Io with the Bulls, where once they put him in the starting lineup, he started playing well. That went from a great option that might have been realistic to probably not available, unfortunately. Yeah. All right, we have Wes Trueblood here. Pacers are 22-18, have won 12 of 15, and just beat the Cavs tonight in Cleveland. They are good. I don't think we really.
Yeah, I said they're not. I said they're not that good. They're 22-18. So that is true. They are barely above 500, right? They are not that good in the fantasy world where the Sixers were a real basketball team. You wouldn't go into a matchup with Indiana being like, oh man, I'm shaking in my boots at the thought of playing Siakam, Halliburton, and the gang, right? But they are certainly much better than the Sixers, and they are playing well of late. I would say that.
And look, sometimes we look at recent play as well, that's the truth, and what happened earlier in the season, that's false. It's a lot easier to do that when you're removed from the situation. Case in point, there was a point earlier this season the Sixers won 10 of 13. That did not mean all of their problems were resolved. I think the Pacers are solid. You can talk me into good. They're not great. They're certainly not a juggernaut, but they're figuring some things out. I would agree with that. Yep. All right, now we have a trio of super chats here from Marcus Blackstock. First one up, their season might be over in 2 weeks with that schedule coming up.
Touched on that, obviously, Marcus. We are in full agreement with the dire state of things with the schedule.
Next one up, if they don't make another trade before the deadline, that will tell us all we need to know about how they view the season. Yeah, we have pretty much from the moment that Joel Embiid missed those first 9 games to start the season, we have said the question now becomes whether they can even justify being buyers at the deadline. And certainly, if you go back to at the start of this month, we were great, here's a stretch here over the next 12 or 15 games. They can bank some wins. Yeah, that really worked out well. And then they can evaluate themselves against the best teams in the league. This is a tough stretch. It's an evaluation stretch, and it's a stretch where you come into with way more uncertainty than you would ever want. Final one here from Marcus Blackstock, and then we will head on out. They don't have enough fundamentally sound players. Now, to his credit, he dropped this about a half an hour ago, so I don't know if we were talking about that. But once again, Marcus, you, Kyle, and I are all on the exact same page.
It's almost like Marcus watches the show and is in sync with us because we have similar basketball opinions.
We certainly appreciate you chiming in, and you are clearly a great basketball mind because we are lockstep on all 3 of those.
I mean, listen, I appreciate absolutely anybody who was even here after an Eagles playoff win and that disgraceful Sixers loss, right?
Complete, absolute sickos, and we love every one of you. You want to get to a roll call here, Kyle?
I was going to say, that's probably, by the way, go to allphly.com for all your Sixers, Eagles, Phillies, Flyers needs. And to catch us after we're on Roku, which I don't know if we're on TV tonight or not, but just had to remind the good people to go to allphly.com.
Absolutely.
I am indeed.
Appreciate you picking up my spot there because I completely forgot that we were at the hour mark. So thank you.
Listen, man, we lose Devon and we lose all sense of time and place. Devon, I'm glad one of us got to sit down and watch a win today. So he gets the first shout out in our roll call. But yeah, let's do the roll call. Thank you very much to everybody that was in here tonight. Insane that anybody still cares about this team, but because you care, that warms my heart, and we certainly care about this show and our people and covering this team in a way that makes it more fun for you, even when it's just yelling at the screen and saying, boy, these guys suck right now. So thank you to Jess checking in. Thank you to Hinky. Thank you to Jeannie. Thank you to my girl Winona. Thank you to Anthony M. Thank you to Mellow 3 Point, who sent a clown emoji. I hope that's directed at the Sixers and not one of us, but we'll take it either way.
He also had a broken heart. I don't know.
Maybe he's a big.
We need your emojis to be a little.
What's the sad clown? Is that Pagliacci? Am I remembering that one? That's the opera clown.
Sounds right.
Look at the range you get on this show. Digital checking in. Neil Deaver, A. Aaron, Kyle Wright, T. Harris, not that one. R.T. Harris. Shout out to T. Marcus Blackstock, who had several super chats tonight. We have Hood Rich North checking in. We have Grump 856, Prophet 1, X-Man, who looks like he's in all caps now. Maybe that's a X-Man burner. Can't tell.
Ooh,
you better love somebody.
X-Men. Remember when we had two AA Rons?
I think we
had like an AY Ron. Yeah.
Is there an AA Ron imposter? We have thank you to Jerry Sinclair. Thank you to Sean. Thank you to, I almost said Sean twice in a row. We have Dran Fuffy. We have.
Even though I didn't see him, thank you to Jay of the Jungle. We don't want to miss you again.
Yeah, well, that's me missing him every time. Thank you to Skunk Riley for our wonderful haiku of the night. Join the Discord for the official haiku channel.
That's definitely a different X-Man.
I think
because I think the other one had a space.
Fresh Prince 215, Just Notice, Joe Tiz, God, they're Gavin G, Jonathan E, I Gavini. Thank you to everyone. I'm just going to leave it there for checking in with us tonight and hanging out with Derek and I, but also our wonderful super producer, Bree. Hit the thumbs up on this video if you would like to say thank you to us with the algorithm, but thank you to super producer Bree for always being here along for the ride with us and making this show go the way it needs to. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can get notifications each and every time we go live. And I believe we'll be back tomorrow, right? On Monday. I don't think we've shared our full schedule for the week with the public, but we'll be back tomorrow. I believe there should at some point be some kind of presser regarding the new agreement that the Sixers not signed, but agreed to about their arena over the weekend. I don't know when that will be. I don't know where that will be, but we will have more and new information for you at some point on Monday regarding
Might have a little information on Tyrese's hand if they give an update on that as well.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, I didn't even want to try to think about that right now, but yeah, we'll see on that one. So Devon will also be back, so you don't have to listen to just these two bozos talking about basketball. Until then, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you the next time.
Giving the applause for Devon.
See you soon, Devon.
We all silly like the mayor.